Good afternoon and welcome back to the live stream. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope you're all doing well today. It is currently really hot. My god, is it warm in here. And unfortunately I cannot open the window because my neighbor is doing construction or something in his backyard. As usual, I do not know how one person can make so much noise. And he never runs out of stuff to build. He's always working on something. And I don't know what he's doing, because he built like a deck at the back of his garden years ago, and since then he hasn't stopped working on stuff, but there's never anything new in his garden. He's just doing projects forever that don't seem to change anything, and I do not understand what he's working on. Fortunately, that won't be an issue for much longer because we're moving house. What I really needed right now was one more source of hassle and stress, and it's gonna be moving house apparently. At the very least, it'll be quieter. That's an upside. Is your neighbor Colin Furs? I do not know who that is. That reference has passed me by, unfortunately. Yeah, it's so strange. He's got just stacks of wood panels and planks over there that he's always cutting, but I don't know what he's doing with them. We know he burns some of them because he likes to like host barbecues, but he doesn't burn nearly enough for the amount of stuff that he's working with, so who knows? Who knows? Anyway, been what, a week since the last stream? Which is longer than I wanted to be, but sad. Moving, very busy, so much stuff to sort through, so much stuff to pack, and everything else. With all that being said, let's not take up more time and switch right on over to the stuff. I've decided for today's stream to actually continue a project beyond just a single stream for once. Normally I do something for one stream and then go, well, that was fun, time to move on to the next thing. Today, however, I want to revisit what I was working on before with the cult urban fantasy setting. So previously, we went through here and did a little bit of brainstorming on what stuff do you want in a fictional city, in a kind of Eldritch-esque urban fantasy kind of World of Darkness inspired setting, what kind of organizations fit in, and then I drew the basics of a map about it. Okay. I have ended up actually coming up with a name for this settlement. I've decided to call it Twins Cross, which I thought was, because of the twin rivers, and I was thinking about making something about the crossing between the rivers be important to the lore of the city. And I figured, after going through all the effort of thinking about all this stuff, why not put it to some use and try to come up with some cults or magical organizations to put into this city. I've already got one example here, and I'll be continuing that today, just kind of thinking about where on here would they go, what kind of organizations would there be. I've got Fantasy Name Generator over here with a few different examples of names we can draw inspiration from, and that's most of what I'm going to be focused on today. Probably not going to be drawing any more on the map for now, just because that's very tedious and difficult. I might do some streams where I build these organizations like neighborhood by neighborhood, the area they control. Not really relevant to the organization building stream. I did also have some thoughts about what kind of magic these people would have, because I feel like it's really difficult to come up with a magical organization without thinking about what the magic actually looks like. Because without that, how can you really decide what would be important to them? What influences the kind of things that they would pursue? Because, for example, if magic is super widespread and easy to access, that's going to lead to probably very open, very large kind of government organizations. Whereas if it's really difficult, the opposite, you'd have much smaller, more elite organizations, something like that. I love there's like 10 to 15 cults in one city. I can just imagine an exasperated agent just like, you'd think they'd all destroy each other eventually. Apparently not. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, a big inspiration for this setting is the World of Darkness, the tabletop RPG setting, so Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, etc, etc. The, which one's the werewolf one? Werewolf the Awakening? Something like that? I don't know. Werewolves are the least interesting in that setting as far as I'm concerned. And you do eventually look at all of the different splats, the different rulebooks, and kind of go, okay, this city has several factions of vampires, different orders of mages, packs of werewolves, different whatever the name is for groups of changelings. Surely at some point they're gonna run out of space for all these supernaturals. Like, that's just a handful. There's like 15 spats or something in World of Darkness. Where do they all fit? But I love it. I love a city that feels really just full of hidden things, little nooks and crannies and cool stuff going on. And with a large enough population it also works when you start to consider that a lot of these organizations only have like 5 members. They're not that big. It's not like you've got a whole government of, you know, several hundred vampires running things across the city. No, you've got like, I don't know, 30 in total, and those 30 are split into 7 different groups. Which is a similar kind of vibe that I'm going for in this setting. The basics of magic that I've come up with for this setting is that it's going to be magic built around connections, and the idea essentially is that the more connected to the general world something is, the harder it is to affect with magic. I do like urban fantasy settings that have the masquerade idea, the idea that magic is hidden from society at large, but it's usually fairly difficult to actually justify that. It's another one of those things that wasn't an issue previously, right? Like when I've talked in the past about certain aspects of magic that kind of clash with physics, didn't used to be an issue when people didn't know and didn't think about it. Nowadays, people think about it a lot, they're a lot more informed, so it does become an issue. And the idea of a magical masquerade is becoming increasingly unpopular because people just kind of go, well, everyone's got a smartphone, surely someone would record this stuff if it was actually happening. You couldn't possibly keep magic a secret. So what I've come up with for this setting is that basically, of all the Eldritch entities, there's one who's basically one. They're in charge. The world belongs to them. I've taken to calling them the Mandate, and there will be one of these organizations will be in worship of the Mandate, and it controls reality, and it has decided that the world should function with the laws of physics as they currently are, and any magic that violates that, anything that's drawn from different sources, gets shut down by the Mandate, so you have to hide yourself from it basically, which ties into how magic works with connections, that the more isolated something is, the easier it is to affect, including the practitioners themselves, so they have to hide themselves away and remove themselves from the world. Which I think is a pretty decent starting premise. It gives you some interesting character work with all these people being isolated from the regular world, or deliberately involved in the regular world, because even if it means that it's harder for them to do magic on themselves, it also makes it harder for everyone else. It also gives you a potential, there's just this one scene that I've had stuck in my mind, I can't get this image out of my head, of these mages being like, okay, we're trying to retrieve this object, and our enemy has given it to someone else. How can we get at them? And then they find out the object has been given to some, like, 80-year-old grandma who's super involved in her local community and bingo scene, and she goes to all of her church meetings and has 15 grandkids, and they absolutely can't touch her because she's got connections to everything. She's immune to magic. The ultimate counter to the most powerful mages in the city is someone who goes to bingo night, and I think that's very funny. So that's the kind of magic that I'm using, and that will be informing what kind of organizations I have in here. Liminal spaces are like ley lines. How do you mean that? Ley lines as in like magic veins going across the land, like placing a nexus of ley lines being a place of power, and then liminal spaces as in real life transitional spaces, as in like corridors and stuff like that, places that are just meant to be somewhere you traverse through, not somewhere you stay, or like the, you know, back rooms ley lines where places you can get lost in, stuck in the gaps, that kind of stuff. Take a sip. I did have I had a high fantasy setting that I was working on with you said like the more mundane something is, the harder it is to affect. But like liminal spaces are the opposite of mundane, right? So they should be really easy to not so much the more mundane, but like the more something being changed impacts everything else. So, for example, to an extent, a liminal space would be easier to affect under this rule set, yeah? Because they're places that no one really pays so much attention to. So, for example, if you've got a person, like in the example I gave, this grandma who's really involved in her community, if something happened to her, tons and tons of people would notice. It would have a huge effect on the world around her. So any spell that you try to affect her is going to be severely impeded by all of those connections. On the flip side, if you've got someone who's withdrawn into their house, never goes out, no one even knows if, like, they've got no friends, no social life, no one even knows if they exist anymore, that person you could vanish into thin air with magic easily, because hardly anyone would notice the change, which means the mandate, this entity, wouldn't notice the change. You can basically skim under, do magic under its nose. Does that mean like celebrities and stuff are immune to magic? Essentially, yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about in this setting is that like there is a separation between the magical and the mundane resources that each group has access to, because sometimes it's going to be way more practical to just do something the old-fashioned way. If one of these groups wanted to get a celebrity to do something, they would be better off just talking to them, paying them, or blackmailing them. If they wanted to kill a celebrity, they would just shoot them, because casting a spell at them simply isn't going to work. They are way too connected to everything. Or of course you have to be terribly powerful. But I feel like for urban fantasy, where you want to maintain a masquerade, there are really two ways you can go about it that I personally like. I've read others that I enjoyed, but ones that I'm building myself for the type of world building I like, it's either going to be the magic works in other spaces, like you have to go beyond reality and do magic in, you know, like a backroom style liminal space, because it only works there, or like works in the dream realm or whatever, or the magic is fairly low power. And what I think I'm going with here is low power. The average mage does very little actual magic outside of like their domain they've set aside somewhere, because it's just too difficult, and a lot of the time doing it by hand is easier. Could you get around that by using magic on things that aren't for magic, like enchanting homing bullets rather than kill beam? To an extent, yeah. Creating Batman Evers out of thin air rather than mind control. Yes, that kind of stuff. That's strongly inspired as well by Mage the Ascension. So in Mage the Ascension, the tabletop RPG, you have this idea of consensus reality. So how most people believe the world works is how the world works. And anything that goes against that clashes with consensus reality, and if you go too far against it, you suffer paradox, which is kind of a backlash mechanic that limits how much mages are able to do. And this is kind of a similar system, except instead of consensus reality, there's an entity that's in charge. Which, again, fairly similar to Mage the Ascension, where there's this thing called the Ascension War, and the technocrats, the techno-wizards, have basically won. The idea there is in that universe is essentially that, for example, a train is magic. The way that a train works with its engine and going along the rails and stuff, that is a technocratic spell. And because the technocrats are winning, reality works by their paradigm, and their type of magic is the accepted type of magic. And everyone else has to hide the magic they do. In the game, there's a system of vulgar magic versus the opposite, whatever non-vulgar magic is called. I don't think it has a name, actually. And whether magic is with or without witnesses. So if you want to kill someone with magic and you want to throw a lightning bolt at them and there's someone watching, that's vulgar with witnesses and you're going to suffer major paradox. If you instead use your magic to do exactly what you said in your example, to guide you use the entropy sphere to make luck go in your favor, so you just happen to be very accurate with your gun, that's way more subtle, way more hidden, and so you get away with it. Now what I want here isn't quite the same thing. There will be a few differences because I don't want to just copy Mage the Ascension, but that line of thinking is absolutely correct. You want to find creative solutions to circumvent what you're doing so that you don't affect something directly. But also, I want to work a little differently with the scale, because in Mage, consensus reality applies almost blanket everywhere. You can get local areas where consensus is different. So, for example, if you start a cult and get a bunch of normal people to believe that your type of magic is real, then within your cult building, your magic will function without incurring paradox. In what I'm building, I want it to be not quite like that. If you, for example, go to some small town somewhere and get them all to follow your cult that you're building, that will not make your magic any easier to cast. If you do something in front of them that affects a bunch of people and gets the attention of the mandate, you'll suffer the backlash just like always. On the flip side, however, because how things work with connections, if you get a really out of the way, off in the wilderness tiny little village that's basically cut off, like no one's maintaining the road in and out of the village anymore, they're basically self-sufficient, the rest of the world has forgotten that they're even there, you can now just cast a spell. If you've got the power for it, you can cast a spell that's big enough to affect the entire village and you won't suffer any backlash, because the scope of your spell is cut off from all connections, and so the mandate doesn't notice you. Whereas if you try to affect only one person in that village, and the others notice, and the others are affected by the change you make, now the mandate notices you and you suffer backlash. Whether this will work out in practice, I don't know yet. This is the first draft of the magic system. It might not play as nicely in practice as I'm imagining it, but I'm fairly hopeful for the concept overall. With that in mind, let me read out the first example cult I wrote and then start brainstorming some others. So here we have the East Bay Club, one of the two successors to the Twin Bay Club, named as such because of the two bays coming out of the rivers. Members of the East Bay Club pursue the arcane purely for their own ends. They have power and want to keep and grow it. To that end, they run the Twins Cross Bank, as well as a number of businesses, mostly focused on property. Being neither dedicated to the craft nor in the service of any specific higher power, they have less magical power than other organizations of their size. They make up for this in access to mundane resources and power. So I'm picturing here that there used to be one big organization, the Twin Bay Club, which was basically all of the old money, rich kind of people across the whole city, who had some kind of organization somewhere in the old city where they ran everything from. When the city then expands and you get all of the modernization in the new area and the industrial sector, their interests diverge and you get them splitting into the East Bay Club, who are all about the modern stuff, and the West Bay Club, who are more old-fashioned. The East Bay Club takes over a bank and uses that bank and their development in the new builds and the industry to influence the city. Part of the reason that this idea came about was because when I was thinking about the magic system and its nature of connections, I was imagining a character encountering someone new and kind of like indoctrinating them, getting them up to speed on magic and the state of the city. And one of the scenes I pictured was them telling the person to get rid of all of their cash and credit cards because they could be traced through those. What I thought was, for example, that the East Bay Club uses its influence on the bank to encourage a culture across I've already forgotten the name. Across Twins Cross. I was about to say Twins Bay, but no, Twins Cross is the city. To encourage a culture across Twins Cross where people tend to pay for stuff in cash because they don't want the connections that online identities and credit cards and bank accounts would forge. They want to be able to influence people more easily. But they also want some connections that allow them to actually reach a person in the first place. So they, for example, encourage the collecting and trading of commemorative coins and secretly release some unofficial coin stuff they've minted themselves, which allows them to influence the world. So you kind of want to both have connections, but not too many, only the right ones. If you've got something that's connected to you only, and you include yourself in the scope of your magic, then you now have a strong point to influence something without having it be connected to other stuff so that you don't get noticed by the mandate. And I think that's a very good setup. And then, of course, we would have to have the West Bay Club. I'm using club like the way it used to be called, where you had all these... I think they were called gentlemen's clubs, because that word has a very different meaning nowadays, but I believe at the time they were gentlemen's clubs, which is basically rich people getting together and reveling in their wealth. A little more refined than that, but if we really get down to it, it was just rich people flaunting that they were rich. And these are definitely that kind of person. I would imagine the East Bay Club to be one of the most numerous in the city. They would have a lot of members, probably not a huge amount who are actually any good at magic. These would be the kind of people who have like a couple experts that keep track of stuff, that take charge of the rituals when there are rituals to be cast, but for the most part they're actually just bankers. I think the first and most evil cult in the entire city is just rich people who run a bank, and I think that's very fitting. The West Bay Club, on the other hand, how do we differentiate them? They're still in it for the money. They're still old money, but maybe a little bit more arcane than the others. The first cult is just capitalism. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the core things, right? Like, it's the second one I put on here. The first one has got to be the academics who are into deep. The second one, it's the bank, it's the Illuminati, it's the shadow government. And I think on that theming, if these guys are the money side, then these guys are the politics side. So, the other of the two successors to the Twin Bay Club? The West Bay Club is old money and consider themselves above the magical squabbling of other groups. Their members care mostly for prestige and learn magic because it is expected for them to be well versed it as well as other intellectual pursuits. There we go. For them, it's a matter of tradition. They have to know about magic in the same way that they have to be well read and up to date on culture and fashion and the happenings of the world. It's just kind of what one does as far as these guys are concerned. They have a heavy hand in politics and influence the city with legislation. Could it be that the West Bay has a high level of defectors because they're only in it for personal gain? Well, both of these groups are in it for personal gains, right? Like the East Bay Club, they have power and want to keep and grow it, right? They pursue the arcane purely for their own ends. And the West Bay essentially is the same thing. Like these are two successors of one organization, and really the key difference to them is a split between old money and new money, and whether they embrace the modernization and development of the city or prefer the old and the status quo. Personal gain doesn't like public standing and opinion rather than monetary power. Yeah. These guys are basically so... like, the old money is so rich and full of itself that for them being rich is a given, so now it becomes about... Have you ever read or watched The Great Gatsby? Because that's basically what I'm thinking. In The Great Gatsby, Gatsby himself is super fabulously wealthy. He's like the richest man in town. And he thought that that would allow him to get into high society and to be accepted in as places he wanted to be. But as happened in real life, as soon as all these new rich people popped up, all these new modern industrial, I think the term was nouveau rich, the old money all went, well, clearly we're still better than these common people rising up in status, so what's the difference here? And they decided that it has to be lineage and prestige and stuff like that that separates them from the new money. So for them, you know, I mean, public standing, yeah, to a certain extent, public opinion, but really it's their own opinions and each other's opinions that they care about. So they practice magic in this case because to not be at least a reasonably skilled practitioner would be embarrassing. In the same way that not having fancy enough paintings and old historic art hanging around your house would be embarrassing to these kinds of people. It's just kind of a thing that they have to do because it's expected, and that's how they maintain their... It's an arbitrary restriction that they use to maintain their prestige and claim that they're better than everyone else. Ultimately, both of these organizations are going to look very similar, because people are practical, so... You know, these guys will still practice magic on an individual level to a certain extent, because having that power is just useful. These guys will still dabble in banking and development and all that stuff, because there's money in it, and they're not silly enough to throw away the opportunity. It's not like banks and development are new, they just don't like all the new people getting into the game. Yeah, not very dedicated to the craft, not dedicated to specific higher power. While not sworn to any pacts as an organization, individual families have long-standing contracts with different entities. That's a good way to separate them out a little bit, I think. Because I can imagine each of the members of this organization being people whose families have been in power for a long time and have been in magic for a long time, and they probably, each family has some small patron god or demon or whatever else that they've made pacts with in the past in order to get them their power, and these are maintained to this day. So while the organization as a whole is not sworn to anything, it's not the cult of some entity, same as the East Bay Club, individual families do have obligations. In a very maybe feudal almost sort of way, there could be something there about the different entities being from the same place and vying against each other, and what standing the entities have also determines what standing their followers have. Have a drink? I think your point of defectors from these groups is interesting to consider with the magic system, because they would be very tied to everyone else, and by necessity of practicing magic would have to be a step removed from the rest of the world, which means they would by necessity be easier to affect by magic, so defecting could be very dangerous. I would imagine both of these groups are absolutely overrun with spies, but also there's a certain amount of a tacit agreement that if there's someone dipping their toes into both sides, you just don't say anything about it, because useful people, useful contacts, intermediaries, middlemen are too valuable, and it's all just business at the end of the day, so they don't really fuss so much about it if someone's playing both sides, because at the end of the day they're not actually playing both sides, they're putting themselves under the control of both sides. I think that might be an interesting spin on it. Okay, top of the list was the academics. Now, would this city have a university, or would there be several educational institutions? Would there be research institutions? Do I go for universities for that dark academia vibe? Or do I make it, you know, government lab somewhere? Do you think there's a sub-faction of both that are trying to recreate a Twin Bay Club? Ooh, the Reformation. The restoration of lost glory. Who gets to win? Who gets to have everything for themselves? A third faction? A reconciliatory faction? Or would both sides consider themselves to be the true heir and the rightful ruler of everything? All are possible. Which is the most appropriate, the most likely, the most interesting? Reforming the Twin Bay Club. It takes all conciliation. I can definitely see. I can see people in the East Bay Club being very proud of what they've moved on to, whereas the more traditional old-fashioned West Bay Club would want to rejoin. You know what? We could do a full-on Roman Empire split situation, like, you know, 1300s HRE, the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, believing themselves under the Orthodox Church the true heirs of Rome. They call themselves the Roman Empire, not the Byzantines or Eastern, because as far as they're concerned, there is only one Roman, it's them. Likewise, the HRE, the Holy Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, considers themselves the Romans under the Catholics, under the rule of, under the direction of the Pope. They think they're the only true heir. It could be that both of these organizations call themselves the Twin Bay Club, And it's the rest of the city, the other cults and organizations, that call them the East Bay Club and the West Bay Club. I think both sides consider themselves true heirs, but there are members playing both sides who are trying to make sure only they are the inheritors, regardless of previous faction. Yeah. A full-on split of a Roman Empire, true heirs, like, because in real life, so many people, like the Ottomans, the Russians, lots of people call themselves the true heirs of Rome. Ooh. So, one of the two successors still calling themselves the Twin Bay Club. The other of the two successors still calling themselves the Twin Bay Club. And the two are both vying to be the true successor for different reasons. And reversed, look at the cardinality here, it would be the West Bay Club, that is the Byzantine Empire, and the East Bay Club, that is the HRE. But yeah, that's a nice dynamic. The potential for people in both factions to band together, abandon these two organizations, and then, like the Russians or the Ottomans, form a new one and claim that they're the true successor? Fantastic. We'll go with that. I might need to draw like a political map. You know, once an actual map has been drawn, I might make a political overlay showing territories owned. That could be very interesting. Yes, okay, with that change in mind, looking again at the academics. There has to be a university. I like dark academia and the aesthetic too much for there not to be a university involved. Of some description. But will it just be the one university? Will there be multiple? Like, this should be a fairly large city, but even large cities don't tend to have a bunch of universities. And then the question is, do I also have research labs? I think in terms of infighting and interplay, having a university that just has different departments already gives you enough. Would the uni be where the mandate is based, because it sets the rules of the physical? No, I really like the idea of, so, like, the way I wrote it here, a cult at a university who claim it's for the pursuit of knowledge, not power. But actually, these are the people who are digging too deep. These are the people who become obsessed. Even if it is with knowledge, they become obsessed, they betray their principles. They dig too deeply and too greedily. They can't hold themselves back. I love that kind of philosopher gone mad kind of style. So the uni guys can't be the ones who are upholding the mandate. To be honest, I'm thinking that the mandate's cult? What do we call them? Church would be very on the nose. I feel like that's too simple, but okay, work in progress name, the cult of the mandate. I'm thinking they're going to be actually a fairly irrelevant organization. One of the smallest cults to still be well known across the magical community. Because these guys essentially don't have to or need to do anything, right? Like, their guy has won. The mandate is in charge and essentially unchallenged. The world belongs to it. So these guys don't really have to do much. And also the mandate wants the world to, you know, be as people think it is. It's not going around handing out power. These guys are not getting any magic from the mandate itself. Any magic they do is the same magic anyone else can do, which means they're trying to skirt around its rules and justifying it to themselves as being for the greater good. So really, they're a small group of fanatics worshipping a god that doesn't care about them, and are only really feared and relevant to the rest of the city because they can go out of their way to deliberately insert themselves into spells and draw the attention of a mandate to a specific location in order to take down other practitioners. And that was a lot of words which I'm not going to write down right now, but that's basically the idea of these guys. We'll come back to them. Keepers of the Order Mandatus. That sounds very Warhammer 40k. Keepers, maybe. Keepers, an organization keeping things in check, keeping things as they should be. Maybe put law in there, something about a law. I think you see names like that pop up occasionally, right? Something like the House of Law. The House of Law. There was some kind of kids TV show. I think it was like a half game show, half story show about kids finding a magic book called The House of Anubis. That's just popped into my head. Yeah, the House of Law, the cult. They wouldn't call themselves a cult. Other organizations will call themselves cult. These guys would call themselves a church, actually. Though I thought it was too on the nose at first, but the more I think about it, the more it's like, yeah, these guys absolutely consider themselves a proper, organized religion. They would call themselves a church. Or temple, perhaps, depending on what kind of leaning they have. House of the Law, Church of the Law, Keepers of the Mandate. I do intend for the Mandate to have actual agents within the world. Like when... okay, now I do need to write this down so that this makes sense in context. The Mandate doesn't care about worship and doesn't hand out powers since it doesn't want there to be magic. When the Mandate actually decides to act in the world beyond shutting down spells, it sends it agents / angels called edicts. There we go. That works, I think. Half the reason that this thing is called a mandate is because I was thinking about possible names for a creature of order, like imposing its order onto the world, and words like mandate and edict popped up, and then I thought, oh, a creature called the mandate with angels called edicts. That seems very cool. So if they're inserting themselves into spells to draw the attention of a mandate, does that mean that they're naturally community connected? Might be. Depends on the approach of each individual one. Because the mandate doesn't like blip people out of existence if they cast any sort of magic. If you do something big enough, it will act against you very directly, and the fallout of that, the backlash of that, might destroy a person. But it, you know, for small stuff, if you walk out in front of a crowd and try to levitate yourself, you simply won't float. You'll just stay on the ground. It won't work because the mandate acting through the entire crowd watching you prevents it from happening. So these people might just use their own magic subtly to see what other people are doing and then show up for a big ritual to spoil it, something like that. Or they might cast their own magic spell and link someone else into it, and then even if they suffer the backlash, so does that person. A lot of what these guys do is going to be non-magical, it's going to be super mundane. They're going around doing like regular detective work, tracking down potential mages, surveilling them, and if they turn out to be magical, shooting them. Could a street magician do magic in public because it's expected that it's a gimmick? No, you're not trying to fool the people watching you, you're trying to hide from the eyes of God, and God sees through your bullshit. The mandate knows the difference between a trick and magic. That kind of, because it's a gimmick stuff, that's how magic would work in Mage the Ascension. In Mage, if you want to blow someone up with a fireball, and you instead make it look like there was a gas leak and a pipe exploded, you can get away with that. Because you're fighting against consensus reality and the belief of other people. In this, what I'm writing here, you're fighting against an entity that is actively set for rules and knows when you're breaking them. If it can see you. If what you're doing is big enough to draw its attention. You could trip someone up in a crowd, because someone tripping up isn't a huge effect on other people. Like if you start floating, the whole crowd is going to be focused on you. It's going to be a huge thing. People are going to be talking about it, thinking about it, interacting with it. Whereas if someone trips, how many people care if someone trips? I mean, in a crowd, maybe. In a crowd, it might still be too much attention for you to trip someone up. But if someone is like on their own, walking through a park, and you make them step on their shoelace, that's very minor. It has very little impact. In theory, you could make someone late for something, but that's something that would happen in the future, not in the moment of when you're casting your spell, so that wouldn't probably be noticed. I think we are now making up the magic system as we go along. I think if you made someone trip up and they cracked their head open on the pavement, now your action has suddenly had a really big impact, and that ripple would draw the mandate back to you. I think that's probably a good way of ruling it, that if you try to cast what you thought was a small spell, and it goes through because it was a small action, but then suddenly has big consequences, well, congratulations, you are now suffering backlash. The mandate has noticed you, and almost retroactively acted against you. It's a little wishy-washy. I'll still have to work it out, because as I said earlier, maybe that's where the edicts come into play. When you do something big, but it's already happened, the mandate can't undo a spell that you cast successfully. It can stop a spell from working if it notices you trying, but it can't stop something that's already been done. So that's when the edicts come into play. Yeah, objective survive. There is now an angel trying to hunt you down because the mandate knows your name and is kind of annoyed that you managed to get one by on it. Very vindictive creature. That sounds good, yes. These are most often dispatched after a major spell has succeeded in escaping the mandate's notice, and it wants to eliminate the mage responsible. Something like that. But now, for realsies, really, we gotta talk about the nerds. I keep getting sidetracked, but the nerds, the university. So, researchers getting lost and corrupted in their pursuit of knowledge. Yep. Oh, Jesus. Hang on a second here. I hit a key on the keyboard and Opera GX opened up a different window. There we go. I don't think the uni would be very organized at all, to be honest. A lot of individual seekers, occasionally sharing notes at most. Yeah, it depends. Oh, hello, bot. And goodbye, bot. I mean, organized... Yeah, there's going to be a lot of individual people driving themselves mad, but those people mostly aren't of note to the wider magical community. Like, they pop up and go down on their own terms, and no one notices. What I'm listing here are the organizations, so these are things that have managed to stick around for a bit longer, which means they have to be a little more organized. There is a university. Are there research groups is the first question to ask. Are there research organizations outside of the university? And if yes, do we include them here or are they separate, right? Because I put this, the government three-letter agency. I think we can have all three. We can have the SCP-style agency, we can have the secret lab funded by some evil corporation researching magic, and we can have the uni called... Probably an occult library somewhere. Absolutely, there's an occult library somewhere. But is it these guys? Yes, it is these guys. Okay, so there's a core organization. That's an atrocious misspelling. There's a core organization centered around the library and several smaller research groups who are all notionally part of the same larger research body. How much they actually cooperate and share with each other depends heavily on what they discover and how much they trust a given group. That, I think, works as a kind of setup. So we have, in theory, at the university, one big group that pursues knowledge and shares their knowledge with each other, in theory. In practice, the different subgroups, the different clubs, I don't want us to use club again because we've used it here, but the different societies, like university societies, yeah. One big organization, but the different societies that all research different things and have different standards of ethics, different moralities, different perceptions of what is and is not safe. They all do stuff independently and then only bring back as much to the central group as actually benefits them when they can trade it with each other for more information. And that's how that whole thing works. What do we call the overarching group? The actual, like, library organization itself. Have a look for some inspiration. Emissaries, Wonders, Creed. Looking at some of these names, I'm thinking maybe Blank Council. It is very standard. Right, like the Arcane Council is about as default as a name as you can get for a magical organization. But what will go in there that would fit? Would they draw inspiration from their university? Would they come up with something else? We could go for the second most, like after Arcane Council, you go for the, the Order of Hermes, something like that, Hermetic Mages. Super standard, but very much fits the image of that kind of university group. Yeah, the subgroups will be called societies, definitely. The overall group, though, makes sense though. They aren't ones for theatrics, they're a council of mages, all the four that needs to go into it. Yeah, and they have research to do. I mean, I don't know, I think academies can be pretty extra as well. I would consider myself quite an academic person, and I can be super extra. But yeah, I think probably it doesn't have to be. The individual societies will have some really over-the-top names, but the overall group? As a matter of fact, maybe the overall group kept its mundane name that the organization grew out from. Like, these are people who were, the founders of all of this, were initially just doing actual regular research, then they discovered the arcane, and then things spiraled out of control. So they could just be called the name university library, maybe even committee. Maybe just as boring as the bank about it, right? These people want to have the city isolated from the rest of the world for the connections. The Twins Cross University Library Committee. That is our academic group. Bunch of researchers who stumbled across a book that they shouldn't have, learned things that they weren't supposed to know, and then taught those things to more curious minds. Okay, now to rewrite this in a little bit more interesting of a way. Originating from a group of volunteer librarians. There's a B in librarians. Okay. Originating from a group of volunteer librarians, the committee has grown into one of the largest and least unified organizations in the city. The committee. There's too many double letters in the word committee. What the hell is this? It's like the first time I've ever needed to write this, and it's such an absolute pain of a word. Oh my god. The committee organizes itself into several research societies who are in theory supposed to share their findings amongst themselves. A single-minded pursuit of the arcane and at least some willingness to care has made them a neutral party to the wider city. They act as mediators and provide neutral ground for meetings. They are also the most willing to collaborate as long as they get more information out of it. There we go. Each society elects a lawkeeper to do their council meetings. None of them like the job because it's a target on their back. An interesting idea that we might revisit for a different one, but I think I like this as having them a neutral faction a little bit more. And there needs to be at least one. Someone has to play mediator for the whole thing. And I think the research group is a pretty good bet. Yeah, co-organization, several small research groups. How much actually copy and share? Yeah, we can delete this now. Yeah. Originating from a group of volunteer librarians, the committee has grown into one of the largest and least unified organizations in the city. The committee organizes itself into several research societies who are in theory supposed to share their findings amongst themselves. Their single-minded pursuit of the arcane and at least some willingness to share has made them a neutral party to the wider city. They act as mediators and provide neutral ground for meetings. They are also the most willing to collaborate as long as they get more information out of it. Outwardly neutral, inwardly warring. I think these are people who are supremely willing to sacrifice others for their own ends, but they don't care about anything enough to fight over it. They just want to continue reading this new book they found or try another experiment. They spend most of their time in one room just poring over spell books. Which is probably why the rest of the city leaves them alone to begin with, right? Like, if they were organized and unified and cared, then this would be one of, if not the biggest organization in the city, and everyone else would see them as a threat. As it stands, this is a dozen groups of friends in a trench coat pretending to be something bigger. I think inwardly warring... I think for the scale that I'm working with here, inwardly warring doesn't quite work, because we are, like, largest organization in the city, we're still going to be talking about 50 people absolute maximum, and I think even that's stretching it. Even 50 might be too much. Maybe more like 30 climbing towards 40, like a dozen groups of 3 will give us 36. Maybe some of them are just pairs, a couple of them are individuals, some of them are groups of 3 or 4 even. Yeah, like 40 or so people, maybe up to 50 is the extent of this. That's enough people to get into it with each other if you really want to argue, but for a war? I think the only, like, there's gonna be maybe 3 or 4 groups in the city on a whole who could sustain a prolonged conflict. Like, a war between most cults in the city is going to be an afternoon of fighting. A war that's long term, the East Bay Club, the West Bay Club, and I want there to be a couple criminal gangs who have some low-level magic amongst their members. But mostly when these people are fighting with each other, they're fighting using mundane means. They're fighting, you know, they've got guns, they've got knives, not they've got fireballs, they've got magic missiles. So the nerds, the people who are fully in it for the magic, they have way better things to be doing than fighting over anything. They'll sell you out for a corn chip, but they'll also cut their losses the moment it becomes inconvenient to contest someone over something. Yeah. I guess I should outline the rest of the big organizations and then consider small ones of like 5 or so people across the city. And also maybe a couple names of societies. Nah, no, we can come up with those another time. There's no need for that right now. Let's put 2 spaces these, just to space them out a bit. Okay, so big organizations. We're gonna have street level gang, bigger, organized. Jesus Christ, I cannot spell. Organized crime. Who else needs to be big? Who else do I want to be big? Again, this is big. Big means in terms of actual magical practitioners, like a couple dozen is big. In terms of mundane members, they can have much, much more, right? Like these business people control whole businesses. They've got maybe hundreds of employees, and a good few of those are going to be employed in illegal business, so they can use them to get stuff done for their magic side of things. But most of them won't even know that magic is real or that they're doing anything magic related. They just know that they've been told to go break that guy's legs. Yeah, 2 criminal organizations, one that's more street level, like grown in the city. One is organized crime from outside the city that has a presence in it. Right, like we can have, you know, if the Bay clubs are keeping control across here, there's going to be some cults in the woods that do like sacrifices under the moonlight and stuff. And then like with this abandoned area in the middle between the industrial area and this sort of urban sprawl, we can have a from the city gang down here somewhere holding territory, and then coming in through the docks into the industrial area, some out-of-town organized crime on this side of things. And that'll be these 2. Fireball? Nah, kneecap them. Yeah, that's gonna be one of the core conceits of this world, is that in most cases, it's just gonna be easier for someone to do something in a mundane manner. They pull out the magic when something really, really has to get done. Most magic will be when dealing with other magic. So, like people will put themselves in situations that require magic. A mage will decide, oh, I need to get access to some ingredients for this big experiment I want to do, so I'm gonna have to summon some kind of creature from beyond, and then to fight that creature from beyond they use magic. But when the mage goes, hey, I need to deal with this other mage in the city, I'm gonna go hit them with my car. Right? That's the way things are gonna work. From the list, vampire. Let's lay off the. Actually, no, vampires. This won't be one of the big ones, but vampires in the woods. Yes, somewhere here between the old part of the city and the woods, there are vampires. Demon cult, yeah, we'll have one of those. The very traditional demon cult, people doing sacrifices in the woods. The 3-letter agency, the government presence. I'm not feeling it. It's a staple of the genre, and I like it. But for this particular city, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. And also the Deep One's cold. Man, do I love me some Cthulhu, but did you just type 3 asterisks, or do I have settings filtering out a swear word somewhere? Because I don't think I do. I don't think I've banned any specific words. It was supposed to be a clip. Ah, yeah, no, links are disabled. Links are very much disabled. And I think I'll keep it that way. The ancient Egypt-inspired one, it's cool. Mummies are cool. Gold is very, very, very cool. But for this city... is it good? I don't know. I don't think so. No ancient Egypt, no deep ones, no 3-letter agency. Yes to the research club, yes to the demon cult. Churches? There will be some of these just by the nature of certain people worshipping creatures that give them power. And some of them will be evil and some of them will be good. But those are just, you know, they don't need to be categorized as this. They'll be, something else will be the focal point of those organizations. We've got this. We've got this. Yeah, okay. That's fine then. So will this be the full extent of the big organizations? One big financial player, one big political player, the academics, and organized crime. Because the academics cover the pure, genuine wizardry side of things, right? So we don't need like an arcane council kind of deal. We've got that here. And then there's government involvement, but I think with how this whole thing works, with a mandate existing and crushing magic out, this is not a setting where I want big government involvement. Not in terms of size, but perhaps in terms of influence and impact. There can be one single police precinct that has learned about magic and is trying to keep the mages in check. Maybe. I don't like the police as a general rule, but I'm not adverse to writing a couple of people try to actually do the job properly, right? We can have good people here and there. Yeah, I think we'll have one of these, and they'll have a lot of power just by default because they're the actual law and can just use that against people. You know, so in the same way that what's his face, the famous criminal, got caught by the IRS for not doing his taxes properly instead of all the other crimes he did. You've got all these wizards running around thinking that, yeah, Al Capone, that's the one. You've got all these wizards running around worried that some demon is going to come out of hell and eat them, and it's like, no, actually the cop here just noticed that you've not got a license for that, mate. And that's their downfall. I think that's very funny. I think that's funny in the same way that the grandma at Bingo Club being near immune to magic is funny. So we'll go with that. Okay. In that case, it becomes more important to start thinking about names and the features of these smaller organizations, right? This entire thing is a little bit more delicate because it's super easy to hand wave. I could just go, here's a police precinct that knows about magic and they're trying to protect people from magic nonsense, and I could just go, here's a couple gangs and crime organizations that happen to have magic. But I care about the real world reasons why people turn to crime a little more. So even though I've got organizations here that do all sorts of illegal things, the actual criminal organizations, I want to think a little bit more carefully about why they're breaking the law and what their motivation and reasoning is for hurting people. So these will have to be a little bit more delicate. We can come back to them. These, I'm just gonna go completely wild on. Don't have to think about the real world implications of vampires because vampires aren't real. So the vampires in the woods. I like my elegant and fancy vampires. I don't like the, you know, turns into this horrid looking monster with a leech mouth full of teeth kind of deal. I like my aristocracy of a night style of vampire. Which makes me want to stick them in the old city, but I don't want them to occupy the same niche that the West Bay Club does. So we're gonna stick them in the woods. And we're gonna make them worship some kind of blood-drinking plant, I think, like a bramble. Very much a fan of Dracula over Nosferatu. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Speaking of Dracula, that's an idea I've had for a potential future live stream. I want to do a stream going over a bunch of public domain characters and thinking about ways that you could fit them into a world and how they might all intersect. Because there's a lot of public domain characters and a lot of useful ways you can use them, as long as you're careful with it, because there are things people can get caught out by when it comes to the copyright involved. Like, for example, characters like... who really want to use as an example? Characters like Sherlock Holmes are in the public domain, however, specific depictions and specific details of the character belong to more modern versions. Not Sherlock Holmes, but one example that I know of, for example, is I'm pretty sure that the red slippers that Dorothy wears in The Wizard of Oz, like the whole heel click thing, that's a more modern invention, that's not from the original, so if you include that, you're infringing on someone's copyright. If you want to have The Wizard of Oz and Dorothy in your story, fine, but the red heels and that kind of stuff, that's newer, that's under copyright. Potential idea for a stream, I don't know yet. It depends on if I can research enough stuff to actually make a whole couple hour long discussion out of it. Coming back to vampires, yeah, some kind of evil, blood-drinking bramble kind of deal, you know, thorns and all of that. Obviously there are real carnivorous plants, but I don't think a pitcher plant or a Venus flytrap really fits the image as far as vampires go. I think a bramble where something gets stuck in and then slowly bled to death works a lot better in that regard. So, what are we calling them? Children and childer and stuff like that, whatever terms you use, scions and such, fit very well with vampires because there's a whole deal about bloodlines and stuff like that. So, the children of either the god's name or the children of a rose, something like that. Maybe make it fancy, the Scarlet Rose, the Ebon Rose, something like that. Oops. A cult of vampires in the woods west of Winds Cross who worship the who worship the Scarlet Rose. There we go. And this will be like, again, a mid to small size cult, like 12 members, 12 vampires who worship this creature. Demon cult, something similar. This, I want some kind of like, I'm including this one really for the aesthetic mostly, because I love that dark, witchy kind of aesthetic of like bones in the forest kind of thing. I think that's very cool. What kind of forest am I working with here, actually? This pine trees? Is it more like a park that transitions into a forest as you go deeper? Like, the edges of this are right up against the city, and this is a city that's been here a while, so these woods have been worked. They've been, you know, trees have been chopped down, they've been logged, stuff like that. And then deeper into the city, maybe it gets mountainous off in the distance, off map. Or maybe not. Maybe the east, where all the stuff was built, this was cleared over time. Yeah, with the forest and the water as natural defenses, and then they gradually cleared out all of the forest off in this direction, but kept all of the old dark woods over here. And that's where we've got people. Something like that I think would be cool. And then, what else? Other small groups around the city. Do I want techno wizards? I think I want techno wizards. They are very cool. Maybe the conflict could be that the new builds were using logs from the vampire's forest and now they're all cramped in one place. Yeah, something like that could work for a larger plot point. I think that kind of stuff is very good for a story inciting incident kind of thing, but for right now, what I'm building is mostly background stuff. Like these are cults that I want to have been in the city for a long time, and I want there to be. I don't know whether I'm going to write a story in this setting. I'm probably not going to. This is probably just going to be a setting that kind of exists as it is. So I don't really need an ongoing conflict. I'm quite fine having a stable status quo. So while we did include a fair bit of conflict and the potential for future conflict with the East Bay and the West Bay Club, I think a lot of these smaller organizations, bearing in mind that they only have a few members, if they were in active conflict with another group, that conflict would be resolved pretty quickly. So these guys can have conflict because they're going and looking for it, they're the police. These guys can have conflict because they mostly fight by proxy using mundane people. Same for these guys. But everyone down here is just kind of doing their thing. Maybe they kidnap a person now and then to sacrifice to their gods or whatever. But mostly these guys are just chilling in the background. We could have it as part of the of their backstory, that they're over here now when they used to be over here, if that adds something to them. So, new builds are using logs from the vampire's forest and now they're all cramped in one place. Perhaps there can be a relationship between the children of the fallen petal and whatever I name these people, because they live in such close proximity to each other. Maybe there used to be several foresty, naturey cults across this region, and now they're all over here and kind of have to pretend they don't see each other. Like we got the one group over here at the Devil's Sacrament, and then like 2 clearings over, they're trying to ignore the music playing because the techno wizards are having a rave over there. Something like that. Yeah, I think at the very least we can have a couple of these know each other because they've been brought into closer proximity. I suppose there would have to be a certain amount of a dynamic where the smaller groups will band together if the larger ones start to threaten them. So for example, the Bay Clubs don't have any real reason to infringe on the forest, there's nothing for them over there, but the academics, who might think that they would love to know how a vampire works, don't go and capture a vampire because no one group of them can go against a whole 12 vampires. There's only like 5 of them in the largest university society. But if the whole university bands together to go raid the forest, they're not fighting against only the vampires, they're fighting against everything in the woods, and that's very, very dangerous. I saw her at the Devil's Sacrament. Why were you at the Devil's Sacrament? Oh no, I was at the rave next door. Exactly. Speaking of a Devil's Sacrament, if you are at all active on Tumblr, you'll know that that's a big meme over there. And you also know that Tumblr every now and then has posts that drop just absolutely incredibly hard lines over just truly mundane stuff. And I saw a new post, I don't know if the post was new, but it was the first time I've ever seen it the other day, where someone was talking about using some Tumblr language in real life on accident. Like, they accidentally described someone as having like huge badonkadonks and then had to explain to their co-workers what the hell that means, and then they dropped the line, I've been at the Devil's Sacrament for so long I forgot he wasn't God. Which is an incredible sentence. Absolutely incredible. I've been at the Devil's Sacrament for so long, I forgot he wasn't God. Which, like, if you know all the backstory for where those lines come from on Tumblr, it makes perfect sense, but out of context, that is a hell of a sentence. Okay, I have just received a message that I quickly need to go and deal with something. So, oh god, I think, yeah, I do have a be right back screen, there we go. I never ever use this because I'm never taking breaks in the middle of stream, but very sorry, I'll be gone for just a minute to go deal with this, and I'll be right back afterwards. And after a brief intermission, I am back. Okay. Just checked, the accidental tunnelism was breasting Booley. Ah yes, breasting Booley down the stairs. Yeah, that's not that's not a line you can pull out at work in front of your co-workers and just kind of get away with it. Terrible thing to happen to someone to say that in front of an audience. I do sincerely hope I never do anything like that. Alright, so a couple... I think my favorite terrorism is the mushroom bit. What, tell me the name of God, you fungal piece of shit? I'm not sure which mushroom bit you mean. I'm probably... You know what, I probably want this to be like... Yes. Probably want this to be like a big forest. Really deep woods, and the cults get weirder and scarier as you go in deeper. So it's gonna be like... I don't know. 5 of them? 5 different ones? We'll have the vampires at the outskirts, and the casual forest worshippers. Maybe not even doing sacrifices, but just that kind of vibe. You know what, maybe something far more benign. We don't need to go full sacrifices, right? We've got the demon cult as well, so something far more benign. We just have a really nice, good-natured witch coven. Just some people in the woods having a nice time, trying to read their future out of twigs or something. Nothing nefarious about it, except they also have some real magic and can actually do real stuff. What do we call a witch coven? I wonder if there's a specific witch coven generator. Hell yeah. Are they any good though? Fantasy Name Generators is such a fantastic website, but it's also super hit or miss. Sometimes you get absolutely perfect, ideal names for exactly what you're looking for, and sometimes you get nonsense. Circle of something, yeah, something like that. Forest Grove Witches, Night Grove Witches, the Elemental Coven, the Crystal Flower Circle, yeah, Circle is a big one. Coven, Sisters, nah. We don't want to go just gendered with our witch covens. Circle of the Revolution, Circle of the Circle of the Revolution. Actual revolutionaries? Probably not, if they're often in the woods. If they want to actually do something, they've got to be in the city if they want to cause a revolution. Or Circle of the Revolution as in, like, the celestial spheres revolving in the heavens. Very different interpretation. Anarchist Witch Coven. Okay, these guys are not hanging out in the woods. But hell yes, there is absolutely a cult called the Circle of the Revolution, and it's a bunch of anarchist witches somewhere in the city. That is 100% a thing I'm including in this world. But we'll get back to them. What do I call the guys in the woods? Moonlight, Twilight, Illumination, Elemental Grove, the Sacred Well, the Circle of the Sacred Well? Circle of the Moonwell? No, hang on, the Moonwell is a thing, isn't it, in like World of Warcraft? No? The Moonwell? Yeah, the Moonwell from World of Warcraft. Full Moon, the Fairy Tree, the Silver Cloud, the Silver Branch. What are these guys about? What are the witches doing in the woods, besides just generic witchy things? In this magic system, where connections influence things. The connection stuff is all about the rules of how magic can and can't work and interface with the rest of the world. It's not necessarily an aspect of how the actual practice of magic looks in practice. They're not using practice twice there. So, can you brew potions in this magic system? Can you do you draw ritual circles? Do you do chants? How am I actually doing magic here? And I feel like I want to say it's a combination of all of them, depending on what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to interface with, right? Because part of the reason magic doesn't work in this world is because it's under the influence of a mandate. If you're drawing on the powers of a different entity out there somewhere, you've got to do something that aligns with its interpretation and how it wants magic to be, which could have all sorts of different forms. So, very cliche witch stuff of cauldrons and potions and such would certainly work. What about a suburban, like, horticulturalist club? You know, a bunch of, like, suburban, sweet, really normal-looking families who have an allotment, and they hold barbecues every Sunday, and also sometimes they go into the woods and perform rituals. That seems very interesting. The Coven of Community. the Circle of Friendship. No, Circle of Friendship is too dumb of a name to give to a witch coven. I can't do that. But the idea of it... The coven is just the local HOA. God help us. I'm at the moment not really setting this in England or America or anywhere in particular. This might not even be on Earth. It might be a fully original fantasy world. Does my fantasy world have homeowners associations? I think it might. The HOA. Oh. The reason I thought about like allotments in a horticultural society is because that would fit in really well with going into the woods looking for like rare plants and stuff and then cultivating those to be used in potions and such. A bunch of people with greenhouses and allotments and stuff living in nice suburbs where they've got the space. They all have garages or a spare room to do their magic stuff in. But these are not people that have removed themselves from society. But then I guess that will be the separating thing, right? Like the people who really pursue magic have to pursue it at the cost of other stuff, and they're cut off from the non-magical community to a certain extent, right? Like the most powerful mages in the city are either those who are part of big organizations and use them as a degree of separation. So the super powerful mage is connected to a bunch of mid-level mages who are part of the organization, and they deal with the stuff that's connected to the physical world. And then the people who live in the abandoned part of town, and there will be an abandoned part of town, like a derelict area where mages can go and kind of run wild basically, and that's where the really strong individuals live. So like low level, mid level practitioners who aren't cut off from the world, but do still practice some magic for smaller scale, more personal things. These people almost feel so low level that it's not worth mentioning them. Like, are they affecting anything? Are they involved with the rest of the world at all? The magical world? Because at some point, you're practicing magic at such a low level that you may as well not be practicing magic, because doing anything actually worthwhile would require more power than you can bring to bear. I mean, it's not like you... I need to I need to, for myself, clarify the rules more here on how the magic works, because you don't have to cut yourself out of the world to be a powerful mage, but for a mage to cast a spell at you, they either have to be very powerful or you have to be very isolated. So really, the ideal Archmage is a celebrity who also has immeasurable arcane potential, because no one can hurt them and they can hurt everyone else. But then what's the benefit to not, like, why wouldn't everyone strive to be super social to protect themselves? Because then they can't affect themselves with magic. What are they affecting themselves with magic to achieve? Why? Immortality is the classic one. They want to live forever. They have to do something to themselves with magic to make themselves live forever. Enhancements. Convenience. If you're doing magical research and you want to, like, teleport around your house and stuff like that, you gotta do a lot of magic on yourself. If you want to travel to other planes, perhaps? If you want to travel to the space ruled by some creature, those in between the liminal spaces, pocket dimensions, stuff like that. Because there's with the way I've structured this, where there's going to be all these entities and things that we're making deals with, those all have to exist somewhere outside of a mandate's reach. Which means there's a lot of extra universe outside of regular reality. And if you want to access any of that, you have to be able to cut yourself off. And if you don't, you can't access that, you can never reach any real level of power. There we go, we've got justification, we've got costs, we've got consequences, all that good stuff Brandon Sanderson talks about when he's describing rules of magic. With all that in mind, if you have a bunch of people who live fairly regular lives, but still, maybe they're kind of a bridge? There's these cults in the woods, and there's these cults in the city, and both want resources from each other, but neither want to particularly interact with the other, so you have a little friendly community, a coven of witches at the edge of the woods, who interface with both? Yeah. They're not a neutral group like the library committee. They're just a group who has a couple specific strong alliances. In fact, they're the opposite of a mutual group. They're the center of a local power block. Around here, somewhere small and under the notice of the West Bay Club, but still impactful enough to be worth talking about. Okay. So with this new framing, what do we call them? Something authoritative enough for them to be taken seriously, but not ostentatious because these are regular people. At this point, Coven of Community almost feels appropriate again. It's almost so cheesy that it fits. They could name themselves after their neighborhood? Whatever this particular place ends up being called? Something like that? The Circle of Telegraph Coven, Silver Branch, Fairy Tree, The Grove. There's a lot of repeats here. It doesn't look like there's a list that's that long. Of Liberty, Coven of a Dream, Enchanted Moon, Ice Garden, Eternal Garden. None of them are terrible. None of them really evoke exactly the image that I'm looking for. The Silver Lake Coven. Maybe not circle off something, but something circle, like here the infinity circle. Let's write out the description. A group of witches with a leaning towards the natural world who gathered together for safety when going into the woods. Their shared interests have led to them forming a community separate to their magical work, where they own their own plot in a local allotment that doubles as a place to relax and a place to grow ingredients. Being a group that is accepted into both the woods and the more developed parts of the city, they act as the center of a local block by the trade-off resources to forge alliances. Alright. This still hasn't gotten me any better idea of what I should name them, but at least it does give a good idea of what they do. Take a drink. Yeah, so like almost normal people who are just trying to go about their business and have chosen to handle these things in a shockingly sensible way. They're almost like the opposite of these guys, right? Like these guys came in with such good intentions, and then the moment they encountered the slightest bit of temptation, immediately went full mad scientist. And then these guys didn't even come in, they had no intentions going in, they just kind of stumbled into the wider magical community and then went, oh well, this is lovely, I wonder if they'd like some fresh baked pies or something like that. Yeah, very friendly neighborhood people. I think I'm gonna go with, as silly as it seemed, the name from Fantasy Name Generator. I think the circle of community actually works for these people. I might rework it later if I come up with a better name, but for the time being, yeah, this actually works. Very much kitchen witches. Yeah. Yeah, like if these people are what if our in real life witchcraft practitioners had actual magic. Like when I was at university, I was friends with a few people who did kind of witchcraft. They had tarot cards and charms and all that kind of stuff and went to the woods every now and then. And they were all lovely people, and it was mostly like a meditative thing. This is like, what if those guys had actual magic? That's what the circle of community are. With this long description, I feel like I need to expand on the vampires a little bit. A cult of people who became vampires in the winds west of Twins Cross who worship the sun. Okay, this sentence can be broken up into a couple sentences. Cult of people... A cult of... worshippers of the Scarlet Rose. Through offerings to their god, they have received the gift and curse. Do I want to make regular, like traditional, the immortality and regeneration and super speed is such a terrible curse kind of vampires? Do they burn under the sunlight? Yes, no. Yes. Yes, because having that drawback means I can make them that much more powerful in return. Who have received the gift and curse of vampirism. They reside in the woods west of Twins Cross. And only rarely venture any distance into the city proper. However, they are not so deep as to be completely removed. This is the last cult in the woods that can still be reached by road. So there's gonna be some. So it's a bunch of queer leftist goth girls. I mean, the ones I knew at university were. I don't know about these ones. Might be. Could be that they have some ties with the Circle of Revolution, if that's the case. We'll have to see how I decide to build that later. Yeah, so there's gonna be, at the edge of the old city, there's gonna be a bunch of like fancy mansions at the edge of the woods that have a bunch of land that belongs to them and stuff like that. And the Children of the Fallen Petal will own some of those mansions at the very edge. So this is as deep into the forest as you can go by road. Anything deeper than this, you're hiking through the wilderness. And that's where some of the really, really deeply nature-aligned cults are going to be. Okay, then we have the actual demon cult. Do we want to subvert the expectations and make the demons not evil? They just have that aesthetic of hell and the contract stuff and stuff like that, and then we can justify having few demon girls in our story? Or do we embrace it and make them super traditional, out for your soul, trying to destroy the world evil? Excuse me. Finish my drink. Okay. I could in theory do both. I could do what some works do and have the the demon, devil, fiend separation and have one type be super evil and one is just marginally related to them. But I don't know if I like that. I mean, there's going to be some aesthetic overlap between different groups anyway, right? Like if two different groups summon two different entities that happen to like the same look but not operate under the same rules, then we're gonna end up in this situation just kind of by default. But I could make the decision from a world building perspective that entities are grouped up, right? Like there are different realms, there's a hell of sorts that you can summon and contact demonic entities from, and what kind of powers those creatures can have and what kind of gifts they can offer will be determined by what kind of creature they are. Conversely, I could have all the creatures come from all sorts of different worlds, and what they have on offer and what powers they have is completely unique to each individual one. Sure, there'll be overlap, but any overlap will be coincidental and not because they're the same sort of creature. Both can work, both have their ups and downs. In terms of building a kind of larger, coherent lore for your world, probably having similar ones come from the same realm is going to be better for you. It's going to be it's going to make it more understandable for the reader. It's more systematic and structured. It makes it easier for you to set expectations later on. So, for example, if you have one organization that summons a particular type of creature, it displays certain powers, and then later on you encounter another organization, just knowing that they've summoned something from the same kind of plane of reality means you've got expectations of, maybe we don't know the exact powers this is given, but we know what's in their wheelhouse. We know that the demons are going to be providing contract magic, there's going to be fire and brimstone involved, it's going to be generally evil probably. We've got a baseline to work from. Similarly, the eldritch stuff, there's going to be tentacles. And madness and stuff like that. If we go for the individual approach, there's a lot more freedom to mix and match different powers. You're not locked in by a particular aesthetic that doesn't allow certain things. So if there's a power set you want to include that you think would fit a particular deity really well, but it doesn't fit their type of creature, that's not an issue when you're making them all individual. So both sides have their ups and downs. The third option, of course, is to do both. You can just say, hey, certain creatures are very unique, but some of those creatures have siblings. So for example, with the West Bay Club, with different families summoning and contracting different entities, if we want to have it that those entities have rankings amongst themselves, then they need to at least be similar enough to interact and agree on what grants someone a higher rank or not. So there has to be some overlap. That doesn't necessitate the grouping, but it is helped along by that process. I think, considering that I'm doing this as a world-building project first and foremost, and writing an actual story in this setting is an optional second thing that we might do afterwards, I probably will go for the world-building convenience option of doing both. There are creatures that are grouped together, and also there are creatures that are individual. Maybe even creatures are grouped together up to a certain level of power, after which they start to develop in very individual ways. Bringing all of that back to the demon cult stuff, since this is going to be one of the small organizations, not one of the big ones, we can have theirs be a fairly low-level demon that is tied into the themes super duper hard, which means it is all fire and brimstone and evil. Which does bring us to our next question of, why is anyone worshipping the creature that promises suffering and evil to anyone who comes into contact with it? Obvious answers: they don't care about themselves, they just want to visit that suffering and evil on someone else first. So, who does the demon cult have a bone to pick with? And are they over in the woods? Or are they over here instead? Obvious target would be the rich people. these guys are messing with the whole city. Less obvious targets, something personal. Could be a cult with a high turnover. You've got a couple core members. We've got an ongoing deal with a demon that they keep bringing in new members who quickly burn themselves up and make the demon more powerful like that. And the new members are enticed by giving them a quick way to power to solve their own personal disputes. The core members of the cult have a long-running deal with a demon for power. In return for the gifts it gives them, they regularly recruit new members who quickly make more contracts and suffer the consequences. In the process, feeding and strengthening the demon. That's simple enough. Works as a setup, explains the motives, explains why somebody would interact with this kind of creature to begin with. Also explains what I think is usually one of the biggest issues when it comes to evil religions in fiction, because there's lots of evil gods in lots of different settings, and the problem with the ones that are truly ruinous, in my experience, is not why would anybody serve this creature when it's obviously bad for them and bad for everyone else. There's lots of reasons why people do stuff that seem like a poor idea to everybody else. The real issue is, how does this thing sustain itself long term? Sometimes they don't care, but quite often, the explicitly stated goal and desire of whatever evil god or demon or monster we have is to rule over the world, or to rule over whatever area we're dealing with. And destroying your own followers by visiting upon them all of that ruin is not constructive. It's not conducive to taking over the world. So you have to wonder, what is the actual long-term plan? How is this organization keeping itself in one piece for any length of time? And in this case, it's because the people who are actually in on it, it's basically a scam, right? The people who are actually in on it are making out like bandits. They've got tons of profit. This is really good for them. Everyone else getting scammed thinks they're getting what they want, but actually they're not. They're being screwed over. Which I think works pretty well as a setup for a demon cult. As far as naming them goes, I mean, obviously they're not going to name themselves anything overtly evil if they're trying to sucker people in. We might have a second demon cult whose actual desire is just to ruin anything they can. Like, basically Skaven from Warhammer. Everything they touch turns horrible, but somehow they keep staying alive throughout it, no matter how much squalor they're living in. And those guys will name themselves something overtly evil, but these guys won't. These guys are trying to seem reasonable. What kind of name would they have? An order? Society? I want to keep the word society mostly for the societies that pop up under the library committee. So I kind of want to go for something different. Of course, this is the secret order and society name generator, so the word order and society is going to pop up a lot here. The League? We could draw on that whole demon contract association and name them like a legal firm. You know, lots of legal firms are named after like the head lawyers in charge. Like, what's a really fancy name we could go with? Real names, Europe, and then we want English British name. Yeah, like Hopkins and Williams, something like that. Law firm. Harrison and Phillips, General Solutions. Harrison and Phillips. Just that, Harrison and Phillips, that's what the organization calls itself. And then the second demon cult, what we got here? Inferno Tribe it's too silly of a name. Brigade of the Elements, Brigade of something? Crew, nah, crew doesn't quite fit. The Brotherhood of Ruin is not very imaginative. I have to imagine there's got to be dozens of organizations with that kind of name across fantasy. Sounds like the thing you make up at the very last second when you're doing prep work for D&D and you forgot that you needed to actually name an organization. You just call them the Brotherhood of Ruin or something like that. Twilight Ash, the Sinner Crew, that's also really silly. The Psycho Force. I think Psycho Force is just the right level of campy to get taken serious when they actually start doing something dangerous. Yeah, do I go with that? Yeah. I can always change it later if I change my mind. So the Psycho Force will be the demon worshippers who actually want to only cause ruin. I should actually make this description a bit longer so it makes more sense. A called of a small organization who have made a deal with a devil. Maybe I do split up devils as being the very deal-oriented ones and demons as being the more destruction and ruin ones. I don't know if that's a thing specific to Dungeons and Dragons. I know that splitting up demons, devils, fiends, etc. is something that lots of works of fiction do, but having it specifically be devils, lawful evil contract makers that have rules, and demons, chaotic evil, destructive ones who just do whatever, might be a D&D specific thing, in which case that would probably be under copyright. I'm not sure. Let's just change that to Fiend and then we're good one way or the other. I hardly think that Wizards of the Coast is gonna come sue me over my Twitch stream, but you can never be too careful. And then these guys... also the second sentence doesn't make sense now. The columns have a long-running deal for power, there we go. Alright. A cult worshipping a demon of destruction and ruin. They some of their members hate the world, while others simply love breaking things. Their only goal is to spread mayhem, and the only thing stopping them is that they... how to phrase this? Basically what's stopping them is that they can't. They're not powerful enough, they don't have the dedication to their craft to get powerful enough. But why not? I've got a very clear picture of the type of person I'm imagining here who would join this organization and why they wouldn't have the discipline to really make it work, but I'm struggling with how to express that succinctly. Some of their members hate the world while others simply love breaking things. Their only goal is to spread mayhem. But the amount of actual damage they do is severely limited by the cult's overall lack of ring. Let's just phrase it like that for now. Okay, so since starting, we've expanded the East Bay Club to also have the West Bay Club, and thought about the whole dynamic between the two, a kind of recreation of the East and Western Roman Empire dynamic. We've got the academics, which is good. We've kind of got a pin in this for now. We have the vampires in the woods. We've got the Homeowners Association witches, a couple demon cults, another witch cult to ride, the Church of a Mandate. I think that's pretty good progress for one stream. I might look into transferring this stuff over into Obsidian nodes. On the one hand, I do like having things on one page where I can quickly scroll to wherever everything else is. On the other hand, this is very quickly going to become impossible to organize, and Obsidian Note is much better for that, so I'll probably end up doing that before the next stream about this. For now, I think that is where I'm going to call it today. Today is Friday, I don't stream on the weekends. Hopefully next week I can do more than the one stream at the end of the week, we'll see. I am going to be moving house in a couple of weeks, so there's a lot of packing and organizing to do. It is a nightmare. If you can possibly avoid moving house ever, do it. It's so much stress. Until then, I hope that you all have a very relaxing weekend. I hope you've enjoyed the stream. Thank you very much for joining me, and I shall see you next time.